All right, we're recording. Fantastic. Well, good morning or good afternoon. This is the Grit Factor Coffee Break with Shaye Haver, and I could not be more excited to have Shaye here. She just got back from deployment, and she's getting ready to start a whole new opportunity with the Army. And when I've asked what my favorite story is in the Grit Factor, and I can't pick one, or I can't even pick five, but Shaye, I feel like, is one of the people that I have felt most connected to in the sense that we've shared, I think, a number of things inside and out of what we talk about in the Grit Factor, but also she's just a really incredible human being. Shaye is one of the first women to graduate from the U.S. Army Ranger School. I believe you're the first woman Army infantry officer, is that right?
Kristen and I both went into the infantry, yeah.
You
so
both
we
did, okay.
Right in the way.
Sharing the path all the way together, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let you go ahead and just maybe give a little bit of background about yourself, and you'll introduce yourself better than I can possibly do. And then we'd love to talk a little bit about how grit has played into all of that for you.
Okay. Well, my name is Shaye Haver. I grew up as an Army brat, so I've never known one home, lived kind of all over, which has been fantastic. And then I decided to go to the United States Military Academy, and I graduated from West Point and commissioned from there in 2012. When I commissioned from there, I went into the aviation branch, where I ended up flying Apaches, same as Shannon. And my first duty station was at Fort Carson, Colorado. And that is where I got the opportunity from that duty location to go to Ranger School as a lieutenant. And it was with the first group of females that were admitted to go. And when they initially had opened it up, it was kind of like a trial. And so they initially said that even if you passed the course, that you wouldn't even get to wear the tab, because it was just basically, let's see if they can do it kind of thing.
Oh, no.
So my initial thoughts on the whole thing were like, wow, that's exceptional. Good, good luck to those girls, So completely discounting that it would be an opportunity that I would eventually end up doing. So I was very much poured into by my chain of command and encouraged to go, and not necessarily was my own decision. I don't think it was like from a complete lack of confidence or desire. I just think that it was just something I'd never imagined before. And so it's interesting to walk into something that no one like you probably has ever done before. So some fears and some anxiety and just what ifs can come from that. So I ultimately went. I failed multiple times on many different things, but was able to continue to stay and push through that. Ultimately, by the end, being allowed to earn the Ranger tab, which is amazing. So I am a Ranger qualified infantry officer at this point.
But before you go on, because there's two big things in there, I feel like number one, sort of not even thinking that that was something that you would do when you heard that it was a possibility. Like, how did you transition from there into actually applying to go and deciding to go?
Yeah. So my post, each post actually had to come up with an order of merit list of sending females that were interested in going. And of course, every command wanted to send their best. So that was, highlighting their unit's ability, through these females, to train them and to send them. So that was kind of a big deal for my unit in general. So when my chain of command identified me on the OML as someone that was a hopeful, I think that I got a lot of support from them. And that encouragement really planted a seed in me. And these, not to say whether it should or shouldn't be men or female, but these, in my job, male leaders. And so that meant a lot to me, just knowing like they were being the advocate for me in a position where right, wrong, and different, there were no, females who had walked before me in this, instance. So there wasn't anybody to advocate for me in that way, except for the men. And that was awesome. It was an awesome way to start off this whole journey, because what ended up happening was combat branches opening up to females and being able to continue, to do not only Ranger School, but combat arms jobs, be in Ranger Regiment, Special Forces, all these things opened up because of this one experience. And that started with the men leaders in my unit who saw that in me. So that's fantastic. It was that amount of level of, I guess, encouragement. But eventually I had to own it. And I think that that's a huge piece in success, is that you have to own it, and you have to own it for the right reasons, but the right reasons are never defined, right? They have to be, determined by you. And for me, is 100% driven by the fact that I love being an Army officer, and I wanted to be the best Army officer that I could be, especially as a Apache pilot at that time,
Right.
knowing and understanding what the guys were doing on the ground, how better to support them was my mentality going in. And so that was how I was able to capture and own that hey, I might never ever get this opportunity again. Maybe another female won't ever get this opportunity again. I'm going to give it my best shot so that I can make myself better. And to be honest, at the end of the day, hopefully being able to save more lives by being educated in this way, to be able to work with these guys who do this job. So fast forward, I choose to be a guy on the ground, but I didn't even know that going into it.
Well, now you understand the air and the ground. But that really is taking this story, which, first of all, there's so many important points in that, right? Like the idea of this allyship, which there's some really good work being done around allyship of men and women, because that's critical, right? That's critical to the success of everybody performing at their best. So I love you telling that story. And the second part is taking that story and that support and making that your own story, right? It's going to be Shaye's story. It's not the Army story or the first woman Ranger story. It's Shaye's story, right?
Right. And I think we've talked about this too, like that whole experience for me was very personal, in every aspect. So every time I failed, that was a development opportunity for my character. I had the choice to allow that failure to shut me down and to stop what I was doing and quit and just accept that it wasn't going to be good enough. Or what I did do instead was, I don't even know my limits. I'm going to continue to press. If they're allowing me to stay, then why would I choose to close a door? So, So, but to your point too about, what I was talking about, advocacy, I mean, it spans so much more than just males and females, especially like in our day and age right now, where there's so much divide and there's so much potential for that divide.
Yes.
When it comes down to supporting other people, you can get put off by someone. Like if I'm just telling you as a woman in my shoes that you need to respect women that are just in my shoes, that says something, but that only says something from my mouth. When there's men doing that for me, when there's people of another color doing that for me, when there's advocates outside of my small circle who I've interacted with, I've built relationships with, and they know me, and I'm just talking about me right now, their advocacy for me is far stronger than anything that I could say out of my own mouth. And to be honest, it goes a lot further too. So when you think about that and just the struggles that our society is going through right now, it's so unfortunate that the individuals themselves have to feel like they're the ones that have to say it out of their mouth.
Yes.
And that someone else isn't advocating for them. So whether that has to do with gender, race, anything, that advocacy has to come from and will be stronger when it comes from others.
That's such a good reminder. And I think there are people that ask and leaders that ask in businesses that I work with across the country about, well, what do I do? What are we supposed to do? And part of that is, well, look around, reach out, look at the people that are not like you that you can develop and bring into the conversation, right? Because you're so much stronger when you can have that diverse team that you've really given the same opportunities to, which comes from other people advocating, because they're not those opportunities aren't there without that advocacy, without that allyship that they are able to bring to the table, right? Yeah, no, that's great. So talk a bit about, because the failures, Ranger School, first of all, is pretty much almost impossible for any of us to imagine, except for those of you who have gone. So tell us a little bit about that, but then about what it means when something doesn't go right, when you fail, and how it is that you say, okay, I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. So Ranger School it's the Army's premier leadership school, but to be honest, I would call it like the Army's premier resiliency school, right? So, it 100% is to establish in yourself and in your teammates that you are worthy of bearing this thing, which is for us, we wear a tab on our shoulder that shows that, you know, we are the few, we are the elite that have been through this hard thing.
Right.
And it's almost like a badge of honor showing that you can be relied on, that you aren't going to quit when adversity happens, whether that's physical or mental. The
Right.
majority of Ranger School for me was mental. Everybody gets to a point, because throughout the school you have just lack of sleep, lack of food. It's induced that way to stress your systems and to learn how you act, function, react in those environments. So sleep deprived, food deprived, and then under extreme like physical stress, just meaning you just don't stop. So
Right.
never you're in an instance, you know, where you're pushed to like near, you know, death or exposure. It's a controlled environment, but it is probably the closest simulation to that type of stress that you can be in. Very similarly, pilots and other special operations units go to SEER school, where that tests, you know, their mental fortitude and their ability to understand how they react to isolation and different things. We're all different, and you don't know how you're going to react until you're actually in it. So what an opportunity to be able to know that about yourself. So it says something to you, but it also says something to the people that you work with, is I can rely on that person
Yeah.
to be resilient, to adapt, to, you know, come up with a solution in the face of no real good solutions, you know, to choose the best one for the best interest of everyone else. So
Yeah.
so failure, going into something like that, and for me, it was high stakes, because like I said, there's no guarantee that I would ever get the chance to do something like that again.
Right.
But what I did see around me is there's plenty of men who go to that school, and it's like it's a not only a rite of passage for them, but they have, in order to stay in their unit, they have to pass that school. So there's a lot of
Right.
pressure
Yeah.
for them to perform. So when there's that amount of pressure on you to perform and that high of a risk of failure, it's a crazy environment. It really does call out individuals' true character.
Yes.
And I loved that, and I hated that, because I saw some people that I really respected just completely tank on themselves and on their
Oh,
team.
wow.
And I learned very quickly that that's not who I wanted to be. So regardless of,
Wow.
you know, we all have our limitations. We all have, you know, there's some people are stronger than other people. Some people are smarter than other people. So we all have our limitations. But the desire to push through that, at least stretch and grow, and help where you can, like find where you fit, super important. So that failure for me, you know, came as a feeling / emotion for the very first time after our first round through Darby, which is the first phase. And it's really just general tactics, in a wooded environment, how to walk, how to prevent from being detected, those types of things.
Sure.
So to be told, you don't know what you're doing yet, you cannot, you know, go on to the next phase of this training because you haven't mastered it. And
Right.
I felt like the feeling was a pit, like in my stomach, and like a shock, and not a
Right.
shock like, how dare you, I deserve this. It was a shock like, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough. I did not pass the test. I am not ready.
Right.
And I had never felt that before. No one has ever told me, you cannot do this. Like, you cannot do something.
Right.
And for me, I internalized this. I'm like, okay, you're telling me that you're the gatekeeper. You tell me whether I can or cannot go.
Right.
I had to decide for myself. Does this mean, you know, am I going to have negative self-talk now? Am I going to tell myself like, I can't do this, I'm incapable of it, or
Right.
I can learn it and keep going? Am
Yes.
I, you know, am I mentally not, you know, in it enough? Am I not focused enough? Is that what you're telling me? Well, I can focus more, you know, and I will make those, you know, personal decision choices. And that was based off of my values. So
Right.
after the initial sucker punch, right, of being told like, you're not moving forward, I had to figure out what I wanted to do with that. And for me, I took valuable lessons in controlling my thought,
Yeah.
the way that I was thinking about the circumstances, and then the value. Instead of turn this into an I'm not good enough situation,
Yeah.
I had to like make it not about who I was. It wasn't a character issue. There wasn't anything wrong with who I was that made me not be able to go through or forward.
Right.
It had something to do with the skill. So What did I miss? And I started to reflect on those things. What are the things that I need to focus on this next time around, to make myself more value added to my team? But not only that, actually like learning and leading in this material. So I took it very seriously.
Right.
And I think that was eventually that was noticed. And the desire to learn, the desire to push through, that was visible, and that was valued by my team. So that inevitably ended up allowing me to move forward, not just from like learning the material, but then seeing the drastic difference in the I'm here to play and win to
Yeah.
I am here to learn, and I am here to drive on no matter the cost to my pride, no matter the cost to my uncomfortability. If I'm not broken, I will keep moving forward, kind of deal.
So how did you know to do that? Because I feel like, I mean, I remember when you were telling me about your preparation, and you were already a triathlete and a competitive triathlete and a power lifter, and like you'd done the work. And I think so many people think of this as like, oh, this is a physical challenge. But what you're describing is something, and this makes it, I think, much more applicable to really anybody, is this is pushing yourself to your physical limits, but that becomes the mental challenge, right? So how did you know to not take that on yourself and say, well, this is about me. Instead, this is about what I'm doing or how I can improve. How did you make that transition? That's a really important thing for all of us to know.
Yeah, I think that, to be honest, it comes from a couple of things. One of which I think was like the way that I was raised. I had a very good example of being told when I did something wrong, it was that thing that was wrong and not that I was bad, if that makes sense. And so I learned how to internalize that. And I think that, you can take that too far, and, somebody feels like they're never wrong. They can't be wrong.
Right.
But I think that it was a healthy amount of development. And then I got to continue to learn that through sport. So my life passion is human performance, and specifically in strength and conditioning. And I'm pursuing that career and that knowledge base and that, for now, hobby, while I have the opportunity, just still being in the military. But it's specifically, what you're asking me right now, especially like an athletes or tactical warriors, right? What is it in like that allows them to push past a physical thing into that mental barrier and their mental aspect, to not let them down, to not let them quit? And that is all about resilience. I know some people are like very opposed to that word, but generally just your ability to adapt your mind to the circumstances and not quit. So recently what's fueled like my passion on this is the Greek philosophy of Stoicism.
Oh, interesting.
And it's really got me fired up lately. I'm looking at and I think that it speaks to that, right? So you can't control the environment.
Right.
You can only control your emotions.
Yes.
And I think that that's something that I've always just kind of known for myself. But I've struggled with, because I want to be, I'm a type A. I want to be able to control the environment. I want to be able to control the outcomes and all of these things. But really, I'm just a small blip in the universe, and everything else is not going to start to swirl around me to make my life easy. I have to work. And then I have to be able to say, like, hey, when things don't go my way, how am I going to overcome that mental capacity in order to keep moving and not allow my brain to shut me out and to start to, I guess, diminish and limit my imagination because I think that I can't.
Yes, that's great. I mean, that's incredibly powerful and so important to be more integrated into how all of us are able to look at our lives and what we can do with our lives. And especially now, right? I mean, I think whether or not people have asked for it, there are huge challenges, and our opportunity is how we respond to those. So that's so well put. So tell us about your recent deployment.
Okay. So I was in
Afghanistan, right?
Yeah, well, so I got back the end of March.
Okay.
Yep. So, but with COVID and quarantines and everything else, and the military's been is working really hard to continue to move people around, but work through the same thing everybody else is. How do we do things safer, cleaner in different ways. And I got stuck at Fort Bragg for a little while before I was able to come to Fort Myer, which is where I am now in Virginia. But the deployment was a 9-month deployment to Afghanistan, where I was a headquarters company commander. And within my command, I have platoons that include medical personnel and medics who basically get distributed out in Afghanistan specifically to help augment certain sites that would act as basically a launch pad in more remote areas in the event that there's someone injured and they can't make it to a large medical facility. These are interim points that they can go to receive medical care before they're pushed on. And then also I had a mortar platoon, which is an indirect fire asset, which mostly we use for deterrence, but also for our partnered forces to be able to learn how to use those types of assets so that they can do that themselves. So, but they were stationed all over Afghanistan, and that was a wonderful opportunity to work with different units throughout the country, and to also travel and meet so many different people and different partnered forces for me. It was a better opportunity than I thought that I was going to receive. I was a little bit wary of switching from my previous job into this job as we deployed. But because of the relationships that I had established with my chain of command before that, it ended up being a really, really good thing, I think. Just experiential for me and then also for my soldiers.
So at any given point, people were spread all over Afghanistan in your company, is that right?
Yes.
And so were
Yes.
you constantly moving among the different units? And
pretty much, I got to travel about once a month, and sometimes more than that, but about once a month, so that I could go out and see, if they needed anything, how their living conditions were, especially through the winter.
okay.
Make sure that they had what they needed, as it comes to like cold weather, and especially the guys up north dealing with, a different kind of climate, than people down in the south of the country. So.
Okay. What was the hardest thing about the deployment? The most challenging thing?
So logistics, they always are. And so just learning how to streamline and get work. So the Army and the Air Force, completely different entities, but trying to accomplish the same tasks and working that cross communication with them in order to get the things we needed when we needed them to the individuals that were not co-located with us. So I think that it wasn't a bad experience, but it was an experience that I never had to deal with before. And so that logistical brain, that logistical side had to kind of kick in. I learned a lot of useful lessons through that, but it was definitely challenging. So to include relationships and understanding processes and, pots of money and how things are moved just between the different branches of the military.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And how many people were in your company? I think people probably don't have any sense of how big this is.
Yeah, so I was responsible for about 125 people, and then we also had attachments. So any attachments to the battalion headquarters belonged under my care as well. So as a company commander, you're responsible for the health and welfare training of all of your subordinates, but also the welfare of the families as well. So I would say that our families were wonderful while we were deployed. But that separation, especially for 9 months, and individuals with young children and or new families, and having that struggle, that all falls on the chain of command to also help facilitate even from that far away.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a hard thing to understand on the civilian side, is how much there's this kind of there's this whole person, whole family responsibility and involvement, right? And that's a big deal.
Right.
Like that. Yeah. Are there other women in a headquarters company for the infantry?
Yes. So before even the combat arms was opened to females, the support branches did start. I want to say it has been for a while, but really I want to say like around between like 2008 and on. But like as we were continually fighting, the the Middle Eastern fight, if you will. The need, just based off of people, was there. And so women were filling those roles and had been filling those roles for a really long time. So it wasn't new that I was in that unit. It wasn't a new experience for them, but the unit that I was responsible for had never had, that interaction before, which to be honest, I think that it very quickly became a non-issue, because I hoped, and I always came into a situation like, hey, if you have questions or if you're worried about something, just bring it up. First of all, I have thick skin. So if you have something that, that you are afraid to bring up because you think it might embarrass or hurt my feelings or something like that, then just know that I know what I got myself into. I've asked for this, so I can at least take your questions.
Right.
And I will always treat you with dignity, respect, and I will always be professional. So that's all I'm asking, from your perspective. The questions and the curiosity and not understanding, we can work through that.
Sure.
But professionalism, dignity, and respect is what we expect for everyone, So that's,
Yes.
that I think was that made it a non-issue when it was addressed in that way.
That's great. And that communication is huge, isn't it? I mean, that's a key piece.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people just didn't know. I mean, things that you would think are so funny, but like my first sergeant, who's the senior enlisted, person in my company. So he's basically my right-hand man, just asking like, ma'am, do women need, special showers or like any of these things? I'm like, nope, we just go to the bathroom like you do. It's the same thing, and he feels awkward, about asking those questions, but he doesn't know, like, he doesn't know what difference is, what, for a supply request, do we need to, order, feminine hygiene products? I'm like, yes, we do. I'm sorry. It's just part of the thing. So, but yeah, I think that when people felt comfortable at least asking the questions, and I was able to help create that environment of comfortability, then
Yes.
it wasn't so out of the norm. It just felt like, I felt like an okay, normal, like acceptable conversation.
Right. Oh my gosh. No, that's great. And so tell us what you're doing next, which is very, very different and very, it's a wonderful thing, I think, that maybe some people aren't even aware of.
Yeah, so I am going to be taking a third command of a company, a memorial affairs company, excuse me, at Arlington National Cemetery, and the unit that's there is the Old Guard. It is the U.S.'s oldest infantry regiment. It was around before even the United States was the United States. So the history there is just phenomenal in general. But the unique opportunity that this job will afford is a constant presence in the community, specifically to honor the fallen. So in Arlington National Cemetery, service members and their immediate family members are allowed to be buried there. So it's not just KIA, so killed in action during wartime. It's anyone who has served. And so we do funerals on a daily basis. We are working in the cemetery from 9 a.m. until it closes at 5 p.m. And it is a phenomenal experience. I haven't taken command yet. I will, but I had the opportunity over the past couple of weeks to get out in the cemetery and watch the soldiers do these ceremonies. And it's the precision and the care and the professionalism that they execute every single event. No matter how many funerals they have that day, they treat every funeral like it's the only one they're doing that day, with the precision and like the attention to detail that it's mind-blowing, and it's amazing. And it's all to honor that fallen service member and give that family their, the last living impression that they will have of the military, and how we feel about their service members' sacrifice. So it is a wonderful opportunity. In a beautiful place. Every time I go into Arlington National Cemetery, I'm blown away by how much care we put into ensuring that place is a sacred place for our country.
That's wonderful. You're about to do a very high-profile funeral.
That's right. Yes, for Congressman Lewis. We also take care of the state funerals, which is our a big deal. So I believe Monday and Tuesday will kind of be the the big days for that, and we'll do the entry sequence and take him up into the Capitol and the viewing the rotunda, and then we will also bring him back down from that so that he can go back to where he will be buried.
Wonderful. Wow.
Yeah.
So just as we finish up, what would you, maybe two questions. The first is, do you think your understanding of grit has changed over these years of service and these different experiences that you've had?
I think so, maybe a little bit. I think my grit at the beginning of my experience with, my exposure to Ranger School and everything else was more about like being headstrong in a different way. The people who know me best call it the Shaye way. So like if a hard way, I would find that and do it that way. I think I've learned through a little bit of maturity that it's not just about hard work and pushing hard into something. Sometimes it takes an evaluation in a different way, and not just physical, but that mental and spiritual piece for me. And I've been able to endure, whether it's tumultuous relationships or a challenging thing at work or anything like that. I think I've been able to deal with those in a different way, with a different type of grit than I was able to do before.
That is great. And that is definitely something we talk about is more whole leader development, because grit doesn't exist by itself really, right? Outside of mile 23 of the marathon or whatever the equivalent is of Ranger School. That's right. It's part of the whole leader. What, and then what would you say to young people or transitioning leaders, maybe they're moving from one job to another, maybe they're facing an unusual challenge or obstacle, about finding that space that you were able to find when things were really, really tough, to be able to keep going and keep going, getting through?
Yeah. For me, I really think it boils down to like your intrinsic value and your personal value and where that source is from. So for me, it's understanding like who I am and why I'm doing something, and that allows me to put myself out there just a little bit more,
right.
Not expecting to fail, but allowing myself to walk into something that's uncomfortable. And I just encourage other people to stretch yourself a little bit, especially as you're transitioning, especially if you're new, because whether you think so or not, people expect and can allow failures and maybe not exactly getting it right at the beginning, and putting on some sort of false pretense like you already got it handled is not going to help them, and it's also not going to help you.
Right.
So asking questions, having that humility and understanding in the back of all that, even if and when you do fail a little bit or fall short just a little bit, your intrinsic value is not defined by that failure. One of my favorite quotes that not only was, like given to me and spoken over me over and over again, is failure is not final. You can always, the mistakes that you make do not have to define and end you. You can absolutely use them as a launching board. Unfortunately, some people do have to hit rock bottom before they figure things out and are able to move forward. But that's learning what your left limit completely is. And that's honestly pretty lucky. So.
Right. Well, that is outstanding advice for all of us. So thank you so much for joining. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of the group. Most of all, thanks for your continued service and example. It's really amazing.
Thank you, Shannon. I've appreciated it. This has been great.
All right, Shaye. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.